The truth is out there.
It is one of the world's greatest mysteries, Scotland's legendary Loch Ness Monster. So does the lake creature actually exist? Well, if you ask one man, he'll tell you it is in fact no myth.
Every day it's flaunted in front of your face.
Hundreds of people in the valley say they are hearing voices in their heads.
You just choose to ignore it.
Belief can be a powerful force. No one knows that better than the people who are sure they've seen Bigfoot.
Real accounts.
He says he knows who's playing mind games.
Rogue government officials that are sponsoring this, also corrupt business officials, and private citizens.
From real people.
Hundreds of people turned out tonight for the unveiling of a very controversial statue.
Yeah, it really is. The Satanic Temple of Detroit revealed the 1-ton bronze statue.
It's time for you to take a swim.
I'm just excited to see my Lord and Savior Baphomet represented in such glorious Italian stone. I do hope his eyes gaze upon me, and that my allegiance is recognized.
In the dark waters.
The Dark Waters channel is for entertainment purposes only. Although information in these stories can be traced back to relevant and true sources, Dark Waters strongly discourages its viewers, listeners, and subscribers from visiting the site of incidents and encounters discussed or revealed on the show. In other words, we will not be held responsible if you are attacked by a dogman, molested by a Bigfoot, bitten by vampires, chased by chupacabras, abducted by aliens, accosted by the Men in Black, investigated or arrested by the local law enforcement, CIA, FBI, NSA, EPA, BLM, or another alphabet group, whether on U.S. soil or abroad. Thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the show.
Being outdoors has been a passion of mine for many years. It's my escape. Most people turn to drugs or alcohol to relieve them from the problems of life. Me, I just head out into the woods. For over a year now, I've been saving money for a 3-day hiking trip in Washington State. I'm headed to the Cascades to experience what many of my friends call the best scenery in the world. My partner Sam and I were so excited to get away from the daily chores and have some free time away from the pressures of work that we found it hard to contain ourselves. We arrived at the airport in Seattle, grabbed a rental car, and headed straight to our cabins. This place was nice and was nestled right along Big Creek. Sam and I got settled in, had a few cigars, in anticipation of leaving out at sunrise to go for a hike through the woods. Our plan was just to follow Big Creek as far as we could and have some fun outdoors. So the following morning we had breakfast and headed out. About 11:30, we stopped for lunch and sat down to take a quick break. That's when Samuel decided we should try and venture off the walking trail. Now I must admit, I didn't verbally contest this idea at all. But in my mind, I was thinking, if we're going to venture off trail, we should have done it about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, giving us enough daylight just in case we got lost. But I didn't say anything, and we moved northward off the trail. Sam is a retired Marine and well-trained in the outdoors. Besides, he's my life partner and I trust him. We have ventured out this way many a times and had absolutely no problems. So I was confident that we would make it back just fine. However, what we were about to walk into was something that neither Sam and I had ever encountered. You see, we had been walking up this steep slope for about 15 minutes. Then we reached the top of this hill. From that vantage point, you were able to overlook this very small valley with a creek below. Sam, being a little bit faster than I, he reached the peak a few minutes before me, and he was looking down at some tracks on the ground when I arrived. That's when he turned to me and said, "We probably need to start heading back. Listen, I'm a great hiker, and I'm good at moving through the woods, but tracking is not my strong suit." So when Sam pointed to the ground and told me that these were fresh grizzly prints, this fear began to wash over me. Now, of course, we had bear spray, but we had no weapon. It's not like you can hop on a plane with a rifle and tell the TSA, "No worries, this rifle is only for safety purposes." So as we stood there, Sam's attention turned to the valley below. He started to shade his eyes from the sun and said, "Holy fuck, we gotta go right now." I kid you not. Below and across the creek from us was a freaking grizzly bear. Distance, I'd say 500 yards away, and that's not very far considering the fact that they run more than 20 miles an hour. The good thing was that it didn't see us, and we were upwind from it. So we thought, how many times will you ever get a chance to see a grizzly bear in the wild? And we stood there and observed it for a few minutes. We had been watching it for no more than 3 minutes when this bear started acting strange. It turned and faced the wood lines, then started backing up, crossing the creek. And then it stopped. It was completely weird. This bear had placed itself in the middle of a flowing creek of water, and it just stood there. And it looked confused, sniffing the air and looking left to right. That's when we heard this knocking sound from below us in the wood line. It got louder and louder. It felt like something was happening. At the time, I had absolutely no clue what it was, but we were both about to learn that the world is not what it seems. The grizzly started reacting to the knocking sound that was coming from below us, turning and facing our direction, and he began to back up, crossing the creek to the other side from which he came. For the next 30 minutes, we stood there as this bear moved back and forth across the creek, and every time it got to one side or the other, this knocking sound would start. Then finally, in what seemed like an act of desperation, this grizzly bear took off running down the creek on an angle, heading towards the wood lines away from us. And what happened next? Had Sam not been with me, I wouldn't even believe my own two eyes. As this bear is full speed running into the tree line, something huge, I mean huge, with the broadest shoulders I've ever seen, rams into this bear full speed. It was like a fucking car crash had just happened. It's hard to explain because it happened so fast. I mean in seconds. This creature tackles this 500-pound bear while it's moving full speed, sending it rolling to the ground. Imagine Ray Lewis hitting Tom Brady as he's trying to scramble down the sideline. That's the best way to describe it. This thing didn't even lose balance. The bear rolled every bit of 30 feet, and before it could stand up, this creature grabbed it by the snout and quickly twisted and snapped its neck. I couldn't help it. I was shocked at what I saw, and I reacted to the whole scene by screaming, "Oh shit!" And that's when the creature turned his head and looked in our direction. Now I can tell you what happened next. We ran. And I don't mean ran for 5 minutes. We ran through the woods for the next 35 minutes, covering what had to be at least 2.5 miles. When we hit the trail, we jogged back to the cabin, packed our stuff, and drove until we were in Redmond, east of Seattle. Sam and I didn't discuss what we saw until later that night in bed. He stayed up on his laptop, and by morning, he had an explanation. He told me what we witnessed was a grizzly bear being hunted by sasquatches, and that the knocking sound we were hearing meant that there were others just like that one close to us, maybe within 200 yards. Needless to say, we haven't been back to that area. And since that day, Sam and I have gotten married, and he's now a Bigfoot enthusiast. I support his quest, but I'm not going out there looking for what I saw. There's no logical reason to confront a creature that strong, agile, and that's clearly intelligent. Dark Waters. The story I'm about to share with you was told to me by my grandfather. To give you some background information, I was born and raised in Alberta, Canada. I spent my childhood years with my grandparents, as both my mother and father were preoccupied with the carnal pleasures of life. One evening, my grandfather and I found ourselves on the side of the road with a flat tire, and while I stood there holding a flashlight, we began to hear this strange sound coming from the wood line across from us. I had never known my grandfather to be afraid of anything, but that evening, he made me get back into the truck, and we drove the next 2 to 3 miles into town on a flat tire. Once we reached the service station, Grandpa changed the tire, and we headed home. Now, never knowing my grandfather to show any fear, I was confused, and I just had to ask him, why did we drive off? That is when he shared this story with me. When he was a young man, no more than 25 years old, he and his best friend Jacob went night fishing in one of the local lakes. As they sat there, anchored near the middle of the lake, they began to hear this sound. Grandpa described it as 100 dogs barking at the same time, and then the loudest howl he had ever heard. This was accompanied by a yelling sound that morphed into something similar to an air raid horn. Then all hell broke loose, and it sounded like 2 freight trains headed in the same direction, plowing through the woods. Suddenly, out of the wood line stepped the largest wolf they had ever seen, rising up on his back 2 legs and walking like a man. This thing was massive, and it stood there with his back turned to them, staring into the woods. In the spur of the moment, An ape-like creature jumped out of the woodline, his mammoth arms stretched high above his head, smashing into the wolf, making the most unimaginable sound, a symphony of flesh tearing and bone breaking. The sheer force of the impact catapulted both of them into the water, causing waves to radiate outward, creating chaos on the otherwise smooth surface of the calm lake. The ape-like creature's arms thrashed violently, plunging into the water over and over again in a fit of rage. Then, in one final gesture, it thrusted both arms beneath the surface, twisting, turning, and jerking the head of the wolf from underneath the waves. Then it turned, taking 3 steps, gliding back into the woodline and letting out a thundering roar. Grandpa said that ever since that night, he was aware of what dangers truly lurked in the woods, and he made a point of not tempting fate ever again. A month ago, I shared my first Bigfoot encounter with you and promised to share more. As you know, I worked as a construction engineer for a major utility company in Arkansas. This encounter happened one evening when I was in the area of Mountain Home, Arkansas. This is a very rural area of the state, and I was scouting the right-of-way for a power line from Bull Shoals to Mountain Home, Arkansas. Bull Shoals is a very small town that sits along the White River. I was along the riverbank checking the soil when I first noticed a trail of huge footprints leading into the water. These prints were at least 16 inches long, as I wear a size 12 men's shoe. This day, I was accompanied by an African-American engineer from New Orleans named Frank. Frank was a city boy and didn't particularly care for being in the woods at all. He was jumpy from the time we entered the wooded area. I pointed out the prints to Frank, who was a massive individual. He played football for Louisiana State University and wore a size 14 boot. As we both stood there discussing the prints, he kept staring into the wood lines behind me. When I asked him what was wrong, he just said he thought he saw someone move behind a tree. We walked the riverbank for the next 2 hours, taking soil borings and trying to decide where we would place the poles that would span across the river. That's when I first heard what sounded like a bird calling from the opposite side of the riverbank. Then I heard another call from behind us in the woods. Frank, being a city boy, was completely oblivious to the sounds of the woods, but I knew immediately that something was wrong. The calls went on for a few more minutes and then stopped. However, the sounds were not right. These calls were too breathy and deep to be a bird. After all, I've been in the woods of Arkansas all my life, and I had never heard anything like this before we started working our way back up the riverbank towards the trail we walked in on. But as we got closer, the calls started again. Frank was sensing something, and he asked me what was wrong. Honestly, I didn't know at the time, but I suspected there were 2 sasquatches in the area. I just told him it was time to get out of here. Walking along the bank of the river, we both started to hear something paralleling us in the bushes. These were clear footsteps. As we walked, it would walk. And when we stopped, it would stop. I started to get the feeling we were being hunted. It stayed out of sight in the tree line, but something was there. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a large rock flying right over our heads. It landed in the river, making a huge splash. Now, there was no denying that something was going on, and it was getting out of hand. After my first encounter with the crazy people in the Devil's Hollow, I never went into the woods without my weapon. Today, I had my .380. I could tell Frank was having a hard time processing what was going on, but what happened next made him quickly realize that we were in danger. We heard a loud tree break. Not the sound of a dead tree, but the sound of a fresh, living tree break. It was so loud, it made my heart skip a beat. As we both turned towards the sound, an enormous tree branch came flying at us. I pulled Frank to the ground, dodging the tree branch, stood up, and fired a shot in the air, hoping to scare the creature off. The sound of the shot left my ears ringing. Then things went silent. Frank was now in total shock. His eyes were wide open, pupils dilated. He held on to a stick as if that would do us some good. Just as my ears were starting to recover from the sound of the gunshot, then came the roar. Oh my God. The sound was so powerful, it completely stunned my nervous system. It was like an electronic pulse had short-circuited my body. Then the creature stepped forward out of the tree line, as if it was letting us know who was the alpha male in this territory. Body frozen, arms shaking, I stood there looking at Bigfoot. This creature was something out of a movie. It had the upper hand, and it knew it. Frank yelled at me to shoot it, but the cold stare in his eyes told me that if I was to take a shot at this thing, it would be the last thing I would do. The .380 I had would do absolutely nothing to this creature. It was every bit of 10 feet tall, 800 pounds, and sheer muscle. Its deltoid muscles were the size of my head, and its trapezoid muscles were so large it engulfed its neck. His legs were enormous. And yes, I could tell it was a he. It had black hair and black skin. You could see the definition in its arms and legs, but the most frightening thing was the intent in its eyes. I got the feeling that it had killed humans before and would do it again if we did not get the hell out of there. So we ran as fast as we could. For the first 45 yards, I could hear the sounds of trees breaking as it paralleled us along the tree line. I was no young man at this time, but I hauled ass. Frank, who was very athletic, was well ahead of me. He didn't look back, and to this day I don't blame him. Then, just as suddenly as it all started, it stopped. My heart was beating fast, and I felt dizzy. Things were getting blurry as I struggled to jog along the riverbank. By now, Frank was out of sight. I was alone and feeling like I was going to have a heart attack. In that instant, my mind fell into despair. I knew that this Bigfoot was going to drag me off into the woods, but instead, Frank came to my rescue. Through my blurred vision, I saw the white heavy-duty pickup truck we drove in come flying through the tree line, landing along the riverbank, almost splashing into the water. He sped up to me, dirt and mud flying through the air. Frank jumped out, helped me in a truck, and sped off away from the area. Oh my God. Thank you, I said. Frank just smiled and said, I'm not a punk-ass bitch that would leave you. I was going to ram that motherfucker. He was laughing as if he had lost his mind. And that moment, I figured he pretty much had. We didn't talk about it on our way back to the motel rooms. We just rode in silence. That night, we smoked and drank and got drunk as hell. When he did finally talk, what Frank shared with me was so frightening that I was at a loss for words. I thought the creature had stopped chasing me. But looking back on it, it was never after me, it was after Frank. Frank said the creature kept following him along the wood line as he ran along the riverbank. In order to get back to the truck, he had to run straight uphill into the wood line. He decided that if he didn't make it to the truck, we both would die. So he cut into the woods and ran as fast as he could, dodging trees and down tree limbs. The Bigfoot was running him down on a diagonal, 60 yards away from the truck, and it was closing in. He said it moved like a college linebacker as it knocked over trees that were in his way. 30 yards away and he could smell it. It smelled like wet hair, dead animal, and shit. 10 yards, it's closing in on him. He can't look back. He dives to the right of the truck, trying to put it between him and the creature. As it hits the ground, Bigfoot rams into the truck, turning it towards him, and his body ends up under the truck. Frank slides to the opposite side, opening the passenger door, jumps in, cranks it up, and hits the gas pedal with his hands, driving forward, trying to get away. He hit small trees and bushes, and after a minute of driving blind, he jumped behind the wheel and drove to the riverbank looking for me. Frank and I became very close after this event. He was severely traumatized for years, and we both submitted this story to the BFRO. They interviewed Frank and I, and tried to convince us it was a bear. I know what a bear looks like. This was no bear. It was a Bigfoot, an aggressive, evil Bigfoot.